Heyo guys, welcome back to the Easily Amused Weeb. Today, we're going to do an anime that's tonally different than the other animes we've talked about before, that also just happens to have a name that's way too long in both English and Japanese. World End. What do you do at the end of the world? Are you busy? Will you save us? Also known as SukaSuka or just plain World End, was an anime that came out during spring of 2017. If you're new to the series, I rate animes based on how much I enjoyed watching them. With an enjoyment scale of 1 to 3 and a technical scale of 1 to 5, I feel my scale works best for people that want to enjoy something rather than know if something is a technical masterpiece, since a show with perfectly done technical components can still end up being incredibly boring. As for this anime, I rate it a 3E 5-star. As this series starts by spoiling a pretty big part at the end of the series, I will be discussing that ending later, but please keep in mind that this anime is one of the series where the journey is more important than the ending, so to speak. There will be no other spoilers discussed just so you can enjoy the series if you are genuinely interested. World End is a somber series that follows the life of Willem, with a story steeped in tragedy and a hauntingly well done cover of Scarborough Fair to set us in the right mood. We soon learn that Willem is the only human being left in this world. He's recently been awoken from a frozen slumber after about 500 years, to find out that the rest of his people are extinct, and that the surface of the earth is unlivable, so the rest of the world's population now lives on a series of islands in the sky. In this newfound world full of demi-humans and monsters, Willem finds himself to be an outcast, so he ends up doing odd jobs to stay afloat, but not stand out. Him being a disfeatured, which means that he doesn't have any horns, monstrous teeth, or furred body, makes him prone to being discriminated against in this world because of their hatred for humans, so he really can't choose much in terms of work. One day, he gets a job offer from the military to safeguard some weapons, and after some time, he finds out that what he's been assigned to watch over is a warehouse full of children. Seeing as these weapons are children, Willem is very partial to this job, but he quickly finds himself to be a sort of father figure to him, since it reminds him of his life before he was frozen. Among the group is our love interest of the series, Cathali Nota Seniorius. She's introduced to the series after she bumps into Willem while chasing a cat. After Willem starts taking care of her and the rest of the children, she gradually starts falling in love with him. She's naturally a worrywart, and she's one of the sweetest people you'll meet in this series. Cathali, as well as the rest of these children, are fairies, a leprechaun if I were to be more specific. They're used to fight the beasts that wander from the surface of the world using weapons that, other than themselves, only humans can wield, but because of this, they tend to live very short lives. These weapons they use, along with some of their life force, are capable of making the children able to use something akin to magic that can strengthen their ability to fight. After learning of this, and with Willem's connection to these weapons, he quickly becomes even more concerned for these short-lived fairies, knowing that each day that passes could be the last time he sees one of them. Other than Cathali, the only characters that are very constant in this series are Nefrenrook and Sania, and Ivea Mise Valgulius, two of the other leprechauns. At surface level, they seem pretty basic, but you learn that they're more than what they seem as you watch. Nefren is very soft-spoken and tends to cling to Willem, while Ivea is a cheerful character that tries to cheer up the other characters. Nefren is very inquisitive and warms up to Willem pretty quickly, but there is a bit of unease between Ivea and Willem at first, seeing as she's prejudiced towards the humans for essentially being the reason why the world is messed up. The pacing of the series is very well rounded, albeit a bit slow, but it uses that slower pacing to help establish a connection between you and the other characters. It has you spend time with them and you can very easily warm up to them, bringing about a better experience for the series, especially if you enjoy character building. World End takes a very careful approach to its world building and character development while the series sets everything up. While it is a slow approach, this pacing doesn't feel off for the series in the least, and it uses its pacing to set up the drama quite well. To go into a bit deeper detail when talking about the story, I have to mention that Willem turns the lives of these children around completely. Over the years, while he was frozen, the leprechauns fought using the weapons made by humans, and they'd constantly sacrifice their lives to save the world. But this flips things around for the group when he lets them know that they've been needlessly throwing their lives away, because the entire time, they've been using the weaponry wrong. This anime also goes through the smaller details that touch up on what the leprechauns have to go through in order to become the wielder of these swords, as well as what preparations they experience to get them ready for that kind of life. As you watch, you come to learn more about Willem's life before being frozen, and the tragic fates of the humans that were around him. Through his actions with the children, you can truly understand how much his life has taken a toll on his psyche. Watching him turn from a somber figure to a doting father type worried about his children and loved ones is a nice touch to the series, but it makes things just that much harder to watch when the tougher subject matter starts going down. The leprechauns are the very first touch of happiness that Willem has felt for a very long time, at least according to how he reacts to the very situations he finds himself in. And that's what really strengthens the very father-like figure of his. The romance within the series is one of the better ways that I've seen one handled. While it's not the best, I feel that it fits the series well enough. It starts off with a nice connection where the characters feel practically nothing for each other than a vague interest. As the series goes on, you see a warm, healthy friendship slowly turn into a budding romance that comes to a nice emotional close as the subplot romance comes to its end within the finale of the season. Throughout the series, you'll also notice a theme of the anime telling Willem to just move on. Despite being only 17 or 18 physically, mentally he's basically just an old soldier that needs to learn that he's not fighting anymore. The series goes through his psychological problems and puts him more at ease as he's slowly starting to figure out that he doesn't need to continue being a soldier, and that's what puts him into his more wholesome mindset most of the time. But it always rears its ugly head when something goes amiss. Speaking of things going amiss, I feel it's time to talk about the ending. The series' first couple of minutes somewhat spoils the ending, and it's hard to not talk about it since it's the first thing you're introduced to upon starting the series. It's where the biggest tragedy of the series comes from, and why the anime gets progressively sadder to watch, since you're always getting to know Catholi. While it doesn't outright spoil it, it does show enough of the setting in the final episode, and it leads you to wonder how it got to that point, and that way of thinking is what ultimately spoils you. The sudden introduction to the series puts a sense of doubt in you, which makes you think that everything turns out fine, but it ultimately doesn't. This anime is among one of my favorites because of how impactful this ending was on me, and it's one that I will likely remember for a long time. As this review comes to a conclusion, I'll talk a little bit about the potential parts that could take you out of the series and not like it. There isn't really a lot to the series that could be considered a flaw in my eyes, so this section won't really have a whole lot to it. The series has a couple times where the plot feels rushed because of the runtime, but that's common with these sorts of things. There are a couple of rough bits around certain parts of the plot, and some parts of the story just conveniently happen at the right moment. All in all, there's not really a whole lot that I can see as distracting in this, and because of it, I was able to find myself pretty immersed in the series by the ending of it. The art of the series is fairly beautiful. It's very consistent and the music complements the mood to help keep the mixed feelings that the series portrays. As I'm not a reader of the source material of the series, I have no clue how faithful of an adaptation this was, but it does at least do really well as an introduction to make people more interested in it, and more likely to read the novels after seeing it. If you really enjoyed this series, please consider reading the light novels. The light novels this anime is based upon are finished, but it does have a sequel novel to it if you want to have some more of this world to love. I hope that, at some point, this series will get a sequel anime so I can see its continuation, as I've really come to enjoy it. So, in the end, who's this anime really for? Well, I'd recommend it to intermediate viewers or people with slightly higher levels of anime experience. It might not be the best anime to get into if you're newer to anime, but because of some parts of the anime feeling a bit stiff, the more experienced people might not enjoy it as much. I'd love to know how you felt about this anime. Did you enjoy it, or did you dislike it? If you enjoyed this anime, I'd appreciate it if you could share it to your friends to see if they might have an interest in this sort of thing, or the anime itself. I'd love to be able to pick your brains. See you next time.
So Officer Willem. You like little girls, do ya?